Wake Up Carolina on the iCarter Talk Network.
You've heard me talk about our next guest a good bit. I met this guy in late summer 2009 when I was considering running for lieutenant governor, and I made a determination. I said, okay, I'm from a town with no stoplight, registered to vote at the age of 40. I need as good a consultant as I can possibly find. And I looked long and far, and there were some established names, and there were all these people who others recommended. And I settled on a guy because of a hunch I had. And the hunch was he didn't look at politics through the typical lens. He was willing to be open-minded about, where things are and where they could be. And I'm proud to say he has gone on to make a name for himself as a consultant, but more so as a pollster. He is Robert Cahaly. He is with Trafalgar Group, and he's with us this morning. Robert, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How you doing?
I am doing good. We've had a lot of late night conversations about politics, and I'll give Robert credit. The best thing he did, and it was his idea, was to make me Libbyard's dad for lieutenant governor instead of Kennard for lieutenant governor, and that was profound and successful strategy. But good to hear from you, and I appreciate you joining us this morning, Robert. If you don't mind, you were one of the few people who, I guess, to some degree, saw Trump coming, and you saw something in the polling that led you to believe the other pollsters were missing the Trump voter. Explain, I guess, the logistics of how you processed that and how you got there in 2016.
Well, it was really interesting because when you get right down to it, the two states where we learned our lessons were South Carolina and Georgia. We were doing a lot of polling at that time. I was working for the House Republican Caucus, and we were trying to ID the files, because when you get a sense for where members' constituents are on the presidential race, you get a sense on what kind of campaigns they need to run in the upcoming election. And so the idea was to try to figure out kind of where they were. So we were in the field doing that a lot, and they started looking better and better than some of the polls that were coming out. So we started publishing them, and that's when we kind of got started, with people taking notice. But after Georgia and South Carolina went over, and Trump was going on his way to the nomination, we went back and we looked, because I had heard anecdotal stories all across the state about people who were voting for the first time. They hadn't voted in a very long time. And, people coming to the polls who didn't even know how to use, remember old touch machines. They didn't recognize it. And so I said, there's something there. Trump is bringing out a new voter. Now, we'd already thought we built a better mousetrap in that one, and this has been the case since 2008. I don't believe in long questionnaires. I really think that in this day and age, if you call somebody and you say, hey, you call them on their cell phone, 7 o'clock at night, and say, hey, do you have time to take a 35-question poll? Or do you have time to take a poll? They're going to ask you how long. Oh, it's just 35 questions. It's just 25 questions. Well, how long is that going to take? They say, oh, just 12 minutes. Goodbye, click. So we try to make sure that we've always tried to make sure our surveys were short. We try to ask no more than 10 questions. We want to get them done in 3 minutes and tell them it's going to be short. But I saw this mix of things happening. I saw in South Carolina, Georgia, I saw people that were new to the process. I learned that as we were using different methods to collect our surveys, that the ones where we did not talk to a person were the numbers that ended up being the most right. When it was all over and I looked back at the final number, I looked at our final polls, and I'm like, man, we'd have been perfect if we'd have ditched all the live calls. And so knowing that already that there was something about Trump that made certain people who kind of liked him, it started to kind of remind me of what I grew up in, grew up doing politics in South Carolina. We always used to hear about Jesse Helms in North Carolina and how there was always this hidden vote. They call it the Helms factor, that 3 or 4 or 5% that if Jesse was tied, he was going to win easy. And so I started putting together the fact that these are all factors that are going to affect this election. New people are going to vote. People are going to be shy about who they tell to vote. And this old-fashioned system is really going to be cumbersome and isn't going to work. So although I'd taken a job with the Trump campaign during the spring and helping him do delegate retention, I told them after the convention, I said, hey, I've got to go do this. I think I've built a better mousetrap, and I really believe that if I'll invest a little bit of my own money in my business, I can do something unique in this election and build a name for ourselves. So that's exactly what we did. We kind of bifurcated our staff. Some stayed with the campaign, and the others that went with me, that's what we did. And we started with a model of reaching out to people, building our voter list of people that not just regular people who vote who vote in general elections, but adding people that fit a certain set of demographics. We created, I think it was 55 factors that may make you someone who's a voter who hasn't voted in years participate. And so when somebody would meet like a third of those factors, we would add them to our list and start adding them to our polls. Then we worked very much on moving to more of the automated and digital collection methods, or even with a live person, something that gave the person on the other end more comfort that it was anonymous versus the old-fashioned, hey, I'm John, I'm looking to speak to Sarah Smith. Oh, hello, Sarah. When you're in that situation, it's pretty hard for somebody to tell you they're voting for Trump if they feel like that you might judge them for it. And so we built all that together, and that's what we started doing. So we started getting these states, and and one of the things I remember back during the days when you would measure the Helms thing is something I learned. I'm giving credit. Learned this from Rod Shealy. Rod Shealy, a South Carolina guy. My story is all around South Carolina guys. There's no way around it. Rod Shealy had taught us a long time when you do surveys, when you ask something controversial, you ask the question, then you ask them, well, what do you think most of your neighbors think? And that's exactly what we started doing. So when we did a live survey, or most of any kind of survey, we would ask them who you're voting for and who do you think your neighbor's voting for. We kept the surveys short, we kept them fast, and we put them out to people who were beyond the universe of people that everybody else was reaching out to. So we put these little factors together, and we started measuring the difference. And there was one consistent thing. Every time you compare to the neighbor to the Trump question, the Trump-Hillary question, Hillary went down and Trump went up. And it was always that way. It was never the other way around. And usually Hillary dropped between 3 and 8, and Trump dropped between 3 and 8.
So, Robert, when we see the polling data today, it's similar to 16. Are they still trying to poll Trump traditionally, or are they using these modern surveys that you're talking about?
Well, it's really interesting. They didn't learn anything. People say, well, they're not. One of them's trying. What they've done is they haven't learned the real lesson, and the real lesson is the worst way to poll somebody is with a live person talking to a live person. 4 years ago, they were called deplorable. Fast forward 4 years, that's the nicest thing anything could say about a Trump supporter. Think about the things that are being called this year. I mean, could we go back to the days of deplorable? It'd be nice. But so you've got that factor of people that are really, and I think it's higher than it was before. They really are trying to hide their vote, and this time it's a little different. We've had a whole, society's totally changed. We have people express their opinion on social media, and they get fired from their job. They say something in a crowd that is judged to be politically incorrect, and they're a social pariah. They put a Trump sign in their yard, and there's a good chance their kids are going to get bullied at school. And there's also this thing called doxing, when you express your opinion that's not popular on social media. So liberals try to put all kinds of information about you. So one big factor this year is Republicans are less likely to take polls. 5-1, Republicans don't want to take polls. So for every, if it takes, you got to call 10 Democrats to get them to take the polls, you can make that 50 to get just the same amount to take polls. So that's first. Republicans don't want to take polls. Second, they're very uncomfortable giving you what they believe. And so these other companies are still using this model, relying heavily on live callers. And I've seen that Rasmussen and Fox News, of all places, have picked up my neighbor question, but they really don't understand how to use it. Like I heard the lady on Fox News saying, well, the neighbors seem to be more for Trump, even though the state seems to be for Biden. But I don't know how neighbors know what – I don't know why they think they know what their neighbors are how they're going to vote. And I'm like, you're completely missing the point. The neighbor question isn't about how your neighbors are going to vote. It's the way you reveal what you're going to do without being judged. It's like, great that you got the question, but you're a little slow on what you do with it.
Right. Robert, let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to 2020. So we've got COVID. We've got the Floyd death, the resulting protests, the riots, defunding police, I guess cancel culture in general. And I'll get to Big Ten football in just a second, but as it relates to COVID and some of the aftermath of the George Floyd death, how does that impact the November election?
Well, the impact is completely separate and completely different. COVID is a net negative for the president. It always has been. Something bad happened. You know, it wasn't his fault it got here. It wasn't his fault that some of the medical professionals disagree with how to do it. It wasn't his fault he respected federalism and let the governors do their jobs and didn't try to be a tyrant, because we know what would have been on the front page if he'd have done that. So, but he was suffering from it. But I would argue if it hadn't been for the Floyd death and the aftermath, I mean, with what happened to Floyd's death, it was horrible, it was tragic, and I felt like Trump fell even a little further, even though, of course, that wasn't his fault. But this idea of this poor man being treated horribly and dying at the hands of a policeman, it reinforced the narrative, and it was sad, and there was a lot of sympathy. But then those riots turned it. When those riots turned into defund police, turned into occupying towns, turned into free areas in Seattle, turned into tearing statues down. It kind of hit this apex of July 4th. I mean, we were leading into July 4th, and right after Trump had announced he was going to go to Mount Rushmore, the New York Times puts out something, I think it was on that Wednesday, saying that Mount Rushmore was offensive, white supremacy, or whatever nonsense it said. And it was just like it woke up people. And it gave the Trump campaign something to run against. Because for so long, running against Biden, calling him a socialist, was hard because he had never expressed those values before. He hadn't embraced Bernie yet. He hadn't been out of his little plan yet. But all of a sudden, the fact that he wasn't critical of that. That's the point. They reveal their agenda so much. Who's against Mount Rushmore? I mean, the only thing I can think of is like that. The villains from Superman 2. I mean, that's it. I got nothing. Nobody's against Mount Rushmore. That's silly. And all of a sudden, the other side, you had these people out there who were against Trump for whatever reason. They didn't like this little thing, that little thing. They don't like his attitude, the things he says. But they looked at the riots. They looked at all the statues. They looked at Mount Rushmore's offensive, and they said, but I'm not for that. I'm not for that. And that was the beginning of him coming back. All of that. Now, the media tell you he handled it horribly. And, of course, this is not going to make Trump much more likely to lose. But the truth is the media knew that wasn't true. Did you see how fast after the 4th of July and they saw those first numbers, which we probably never saw because they didn't publish them, how quickly they moved back to COVID and moved off of that? They moved like a lightning rod. Now they even deny the violence is happening, most of the mainstream media, because we knew it was losing for them. And if you need any more proof it was losing for them, all you got to do is go to the mayor of Portland, who all but actually did say, when you're giving video for Trump to win this election, because they figured it out. This chaos that led to 2 million gun sales, first-time buyers, that is not creating anti-Trump voters. So now's where we are now. They told us we didn't handle it right, that we didn't do enough masks, we didn't do enough social separation, all that stuff. But now we're months in to everybody doing their very best to do all that, and it hasn't destroyed the virus, because the fact is it's kind of sinking in. This thing is going to, we're just going to have to live with this and live till we can get done with it. We're going to have to fight it. And I'm seeing this new. We have this question about how you're going to deal with the virus, and it's like, I'm going to do what I can to protect my family, but I'm not going to live in fear. That was at 33% a month ago. It was at 45% last week. It is over 50 now. There is a new American consensus of we're going to fight. We are not going to fear. We're going to fight.
Robert, can you hang with us? I want to continue this conversation. We got to take a break. Got to pay some bills. You can certainly understand that. But I want to come back and talk about the Big Ten and Pac-12 decision to not play football. That's kind of your latest. I watched you on CNN over the weekend discussing some of that. And then I want to go to the battleground states. Can you hang with us for one more segment?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back in just a minute. This is a feeble attempt at radio brilliance. You've become accustomed to that. We do the best we know how every day, but occasionally we stumble upon someone who really knows what he's talking about, has assumed a role of relevancy in this particular subject. Robert Cahaly is a senior strategist at Trafalgar Group. He and I have a pre-existing relationship. Robert actually ran my campaign when I was a candidate for lieutenant governor, did an exemplary job in getting me elected. And then the ballots rest on me for not doing things as I should have, and I accept responsibility. Robert was an absolute rock star, and we've developed somewhat of a political friendship, I guess. But he's with us today to talk specifically about the Trump vote. And Robert, I can remember some of the conversations you and I had at the dawnings of this economic nationalism and populism. Is the Trump voter motivated by that and that alone, or are there other elements that we're not thinking about that have, I guess, to some degree, forced people to look at a Republican like Trump as an alternative?
I definitely think so. Is when he first came out, everybody said, he doesn't sound like a regular Republican. Well, I've done a lot of studying. I wrote my senior thesis at Carolina about Huey Long, who was a populist. I'm like, who he sounds like? He sounds like Huey Long. And he is a lot of a populist. He's figured out kind of a niche, and he kind of he has that ability to appeal to common people and cut through some of the political nonsense. And people have gotten a little frustrated with political correctness and this idea that the system wasn't working to help them. That they looked and they saw that there is a well-oiled machine that Washington, D.C. is. They may say Washington is broken. For the lobbyists, for the big corporations, for the politicians, Washington is not broken. It's working exactly the way they designed it. And this guy is a monkey wrench in that machine, and that's why they hate him so much. And that's part of his appeal. He saw things that crossed party lines, and he moved his party. I mean, Donald Trump did what Ross Perot, Pat Buchanan, Duncan Hunter, Steve Forbes could not do, and that's make the Republican Party a party that was focused on free trade, fair trade over free trade. And I don't think that would ever happen. And that's an issue that both sides kind of agreed on, that America wasn't getting the best of the trade deal. So that was one example, bringing, reducing the United States' military footprint everywhere else and kind of taking care of Europe 75 years later and letting them kind of take care of themselves a little more. I mean, this is a totally dynamic shift. I mean, the world as we knew it post-World War II, all the way through the fall of the Berlin Wall until recently, it was just an ongoing conclusion that somehow America is responsible to keep Western Europe safe. And Donald Trump said, why?
That's kind of an interesting take. Okay, we've talked about COVID. We've talked about some of the protests, defund police, I guess the cancel culture. You believe, and I've got no reason to doubt you because you're very studious and astute at these matters, but you believe the SEC, ACC playing football, the Big Ten, Pac-12 not, will have an effect on the election.
Yeah, and add to that the Big 12 playing. So what I think you're looking at is, like I was telling you at the end of the last segment, this Americans don't like to be afraid. We are not a fearful people. I mean, we have, final words in our national anthem are brave. We're free and we're brave. I mean, this is what we want. I mean, it only what by the time the guys knew what was going on 9/11, the word got out. What they do on the last plane? Did they wait to crash into a building? Hell no. They got out there and they said, we're going to fight. That's what Americans do. And that's what's happening now is people are saying, you know what, I'm not going to fear this. I'm going to fight it. And fight it means putting on your mask, washing your hands, getting in your car, going to work, going to school, and getting your life as back to normal because you're not going to let this win. You're not going to wreck your economy. You're not going to wreck your livelihood. You're not going to wreck your family. And football is part of that. Football is part of that statement of we're going to adjust to deal with this like we would adjust to deal with anything, like a family would adjust if their daddy lost a job or their mama lost a job, or they would adjust if their children had a horrible accident. They wouldn't just, throw up their hands and lay in bed and cry and hope somebody takes care of them. That's not America. And so people want to get back control of their lives. They want to show that they're in control, and they're not going to just stay home and cower. And so that's an American feeling, and it's going to get more and more as the virus continues to dissipate, and it will, because the more of the social distancing stuff is going on, it's going to be curtailed. A lot of people have already had it, and they're going to be looking, and people want that normalcy. They want that amended normalcy. It's like, who likes baseball games without fans? They're terrible, but it's better than nothing. And so people want to get back to normal as much as they can. And so, you look at these people. I mean, I hate to say this, but I think my brother's the football expert, but he said Ohio State had an excellent chance of being national champion this year. And so you think about it. When you look at that conference, you look at the Big Ten, I mean, you're starting to see the Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, and you're like, that's the battleground state. Even the little one congressional district in Nebraska, this is the battleground of this election, and it is eat up in this conference. So, yes, everyone would be mad if they didn't play football, but the contrast that you got this great Michigan fan or Ohio State fan sitting on their couch in October, closing on this election, and they're watching LSU or Clemson or Alabama, or for that matter, even the Gamecocks, and people being jealous of the Gamecocks, can you believe it? Watching us play ball, and they're like, now, why again? What, don't we get to play ball? What is this? And when that happens, what side do you want to be on? Do you want to be the guy who raised absolute Cain and said they should play ball, Donald Trump, who, if he's smart, will be running TV ads during those games saying it's a real shame that certain places don't get to play ball because they were, because they were willing to side with Joe Biden and those who want to hide. But, I mean, it's a perfect contrast point. So we put some polling in the field, and what we found out, and we just started in Michigan and Wisconsin. We haven't even finished in other places. But in Michigan, this race is within 2 or 3 points either way. But if you add the people who say they are undecided and that they are uninspired, they are hesitantly, they are barely for their candidate, like not enthusiastic, that comes out to about 11%. Now, when you ask the football question, that 11%, it's 65 give the answers of let's play ball. And then we ask an additional question that says, among those who want to play ball, knowing that Donald Trump was for the ball, does that make you more or less likely to support him? Everyone that said play ball, all of them says more likely. That's more than half the undecideds that are about the difference between the race. And I think football will be one of these factors. But there's going to come a point when people in Michigan and Wisconsin say, wait a minute, Pac-12 is all on the, those are the West Coast elite. The Ivy League is the East Coast elite, and everybody else is playing ball. Why are we siding with them? Is that who we are? Are we more like the Big 12? We more like SEC and ACC. And I think these people culturally, they're more like us. And they're not going to like it. It's just going to be one of those things because we are getting to a dividing line. I mean, we all know the difference. There are people who want to stay in their homes and lock it all down and do nothing until there's a vaccine. And that does not represent America as we understand it. And when people have to choose a side, that is not a side that is going to be an attractive one when you get to the election. That is not standing up and fighting back. And I think that trend is going to go Trump's way. I think there's always a significant amount of people who are going to vote Trump who aren't saying so. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who don't like him. But I think it could be very, very close. But there also is the possibility of there being a bigger, that even I could be underestimating how many that vote is. I think right now that vote's between 3 and 6% they're going to come out for Trump beyond what able to be polled by most everybody else.
Well, Robert, speaking of poll, and I'm sorry, continue, because I was asking you about the battle, specifically the battleground states.
We're going to get into that because I want to tell you one thing. The way we do it is we think our polls inherently are less likely to create hidden Trump voters. But even with ours, I know they're there. Now, the one thing we will do right before the elections, our final polls, we won't put an undecided number. Just as you probably remember that most recent with South Carolina with McMaster and his runoff, and with Tommy Pope and Ralph Norman, we eliminate all the undecideds, and we just literally we assign where they're going to go. We figure out how they're going to break. We make a prediction. And so when we do that, we will take those people that we still continue to see that we know are probably for Trump that are hidden in there and assign them. So I'd say we've uncovered half the hidden Trump vote, but I still think, like I said, there's between 3 and 6 total. So it may be 4 points more that we haven't gotten to. So here's what we got on battleground states. Here's where I think we are right now. I think if the election were held right now, from what I know, Trump would win. First of all, let me just clear it. Texas and Georgia, they aren't battleground states. That is just a pipe dream. We've done both of them. It ain't close. It's just not a real story. So don't buy into that. Okay. Florida and North Carolina certainly are. But I think right now, if the election were held right today, I've seen it up. We had our last poll showed Florida was tied. I saw hidden votes in there for Trump, so I'd say Trump ekes out Florida. Trump wins North Carolina. We just polled Arizona. I showed Trump winning Arizona. Ohio is not going to be close. Trump's going to win. Now, contrary to what Bill Hemmer was saying on Fox last night, he kept forgetting about Maine 2nd District when he was doing that scenario that got Trump to 269. So you add only one state in the in that Midwest, and let's just say it's Wisconsin, and Maine and Nebraska award their electoral votes by who wins their state gets 2, and then who wins each congressional district gets 1. And Trump won Maine 2nd last time. I think he'll win it again. So right now that makes it so if it goes down that way with all the other predictable states going the way they're supposed to, that's 270 for Trump, 268 for Biden. Trump wins. However, 4 years ago, we had 2 electoral college members that were supposed to vote for Trump. They're called faithless electors. They went and voted for Hillary. So I think a 2-point victory is not good enough for Trump to ensure that there are no hijinks played with it. But I think the states that are right now, if he can grab Michigan or Minnesota or Pennsylvania or Nevada, I think he could lock down a sizable victory, and certainly the more they picks up, the better. But I think right now he wins if it's held today, but it's extremely close, and we are on the verge of one electoral college. One faithless delegate elector moves us to the House of Representatives picking the president.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting and complicated. Hey, I'm going to get you to commit to come back between now and November, maybe in 6 or 8 or 10 weeks, and let's kind of revisit this. We won't go into all this, but, man, I appreciate your time. You've been I told these guys you would be very interesting and very informed. And I'm telling you, man, this guy is as studious on American politics as anybody I've ever met. in my life. And I go back to the meeting we had at Lizard's Thicket in late summer of 2009 when he agreed to steer my campaign in a particular direction. And I respect the guy's talents. He has an enormous amount of political acumen, and he's willing to look outside of the box in a world that very few people are. So, Robert, I appreciate your time. And listeners, you can consider yourself blessed today to have heard it from what I consider to be one of the absolute premier pollsters in all of America.
Well, thank you, guys. It was wonderful being here. This is an area and a part of South Carolina that means a lot to me and it's close to my heart. And it's great to be here with my good friend Ken, who I think I am more than political friends with. And by the way, had you told me you had never voted until you were 40, I might ask for more money.
Thank you, my man. Yeah, I held out on you. I told you that after we had the contract signed. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you, man.
Y'all have a good day.
Take care. And I didn't tell him the first session of South Carolina. Well, we didn't do that by then, but I think he may have asked me, how many times have you been to the Senate? Is it raining? I mean, is that rain outside or not? Let's take a break. Back in just a minute.
Wake Up Carolina on the iCarrier Talk Network.